Welcome to the Public Works Podcast, the show where we bring you conversations with the leaders, builders, innovators, and public servants shaping the infrastructure of our communities. I'm your host, Shane Silsby, and today we are joined by one of the nation's most influential engineering voices, Marsie Geldert-Murphey, an accomplished civil engineer, former president of the American Societies of Civil Engineers Association, and now a candidate for the Illinois State Senate. In this episode, Marsie shares her journey from the engineering field to public leadership, the critical importance of smart infrastructure investment, and why engineers bring uniquely valuable perspectives to the legislative process. So settle in and get ready for an insightful conversation about policy, public works, and the future of infrastructure, which Marsie defines as opportunity. This is the Public Works Podcast. Now let's get to work. Welcome back to the Public Works Podcast. I'm your host, Shane Silsby, and today I'm excited to be joined by a remarkable leader in the world of civil engineering, infrastructure advocacy, and trying to do a great job in the state of Illinois. That is Marsie Geldert-Murphey, who's also a professional engineer and a fellow with ASCE. Welcome to the show, Marsie.
Thank you, Shane. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're going to say Marsie today. That's okay, right? That's a nickname you
Absolutely.
use.
Yes.
We can call you that. So that's great. You'll hear us referring to Marsie today like that. Marsie's a highly respected civil engineer with more than 30 years of experience managing environmental, geotechnical, transportation infrastructure projects across the Midwest. She served in several leadership roles, but I knew her a little bit in her role as the global president of the American Society of Civil Engineers, probably the largest association for engineers in the country and maybe the world. And today she is a candidate for the Illinois State Senate for District 56, which is exciting for us in the engineering community because we love to have engineers in leadership roles. There she is talking about advocacy for strong infrastructure investment, workforce development, and the importance of having technical voices in legislative roles. We'll hear from Marsie herself in a minute. With that, again, pleasure to have you on the show and welcome to the Public Works Podcast.
Thank you, Shane. And I appreciate that you're having a podcast that is sharing what we do, because I really do feel public works, civil engineering, we're the silent profession. We really are. They don't know about us until things aren't working well. And most of the time it does work well. So we're behind the scenes.
Interesting, over my career and probably over yours, if there was no mention of the engineer or the public servant or the public works element, if nobody even thought about it, that meant things were working fine, right? It's only when it breaks, people say, who does that? Who fixes that thing? And then they're like, oh, now we understand why you're important to this society. Right. But we get to these positions like you are as a leader now over some pathway. So let's talk about that for you. To start off, can you share a bit about your journey? That's the first question. And what inspired you to become a civil engineer and that path ultimately leading you to a public service focus and now a run for the Senate?
Yes, it was a strange happenstance situation. So I was raised in South Dakota in the Black Hills. And in the Black Hills in Lead, there was a gold mine called Homestead Gold Mine. It's no longer in existence. They closed down. But at the time, they were heap leaching and polluting, basically, Whitewood Creek. And in the Black Hills, Lakota, the Lakota people, which is part of the Great Sioux Nation, they see the Black Hills as a very sacred place. And so I was raised to believe that this was a very sacred place, particularly for Lakota people. And I knew that Whitewood Creek was so contaminated, no fauna or flora, no fish, plants could survive. So there was a public meeting. I was a teenager. And I thought, I want to go and find out what's going on here and learn more about this. So I go to the public meeting, and this was in the infancy of the National Environmental Policy and clean water. So Homestead Gold Mine, and particularly this creek, became a national priority list site. And we were finding out how they were going to try to recover the location, clean the site, clean the soil. I went up to the gentleman who gave the presentation afterwards, and I was in awe because I thought, well, I want to do what he does. I want to do that. I want to clean up things. I want to take care of the environment. And so I asked him what he did, and he said he was an environmental engineer. And then he explained that was a specialization within civil engineering. It's the first time I'd ever heard of civil engineering, had no idea what it was. But right then and there, I knew that's something that I would be interested in. So I come from a family that my parents had not graduated from college. My mom had taken some classes along the way, but my dad had not. They wanted me to go to college, and I knew that was in my future because that's what they wanted, but I didn't have any clue what I was going to do. So that was my first introduction to civil engineering. I ultimately ended up at South Dakota State University in Brookings, South Dakota, and I wanted to focus on industrial waste because I equated that to cleaning up the waste from industry tied into what the gold mine was doing to the creek in my hometown area. So I got involved at the school with the American Society of Civil Engineers student chapter. That was my tribe at school because I didn't have this legacy in the industry, in this profession. So I got very involved with the student chapter, which was amazing. And when I graduated, there were no jobs in South Dakota. I had literally one offer for a job in the capital of South Dakota, but nothing else. And so the Illinois Department of Transportation had come to campus and interviewed me. I came out here to Illinois, downstate. People always assume we're in the Chicagoland area. We're actually just outside of St. Louis, Missouri, across the river. And I ended up working for IDOT. I didn't exactly do what I had originally intended, but I was still able to help the public. I was still able to serve. And so I was put on a construction project over the Mississippi River, a bridge construction. And that sort of came my path. And I stayed involved with ASCE. I got involved with the younger member group here. I was easily integrated into the community and got some new friends. I was married, so my husband and I, those are our friends still to this day.
That's cool. A couple of quick side notes there. Thanks for sharing that. I should mention, or I'll be in trouble, my co-host, my colleague Joe Blackman, went to South Dakota State, Jackrabbits.
Oh my gosh.
Played football there, so I'll have to make sure he's jumping on. And then for ASCE, it's interesting how you talked about that because I had the same experience in college. I just joined up because I was in civil engineering and we did like a concrete canoe competition, and that's just how I got started. I think that tells us that engagement at the education levels is important too. And I know you're supportive of that. So you talked about working on those projects and relocating and shifting regional locations. Can you remember a point where you defined your thinking around infrastructure that this work is more than just about roads and bridges? It's really about people and communities. Do you remember a point like that?
Actually, it was on that first project on the Clark Bridge over the Mississippi River. I remember at the time thinking, oh my gosh, I'm this kid from Rapid City, South Dakota, and I'm on this cable stay, the biggest project in the state at that time over the Mississippi River. It's all going to be downhill from here because it was just so massive based on my experience. But the existing Clark Bridge was an old truss bridge that we could see from the new construction. It had two 10-foot lanes, so 20 feet of driving lanes, and I'm talking 20 feet of driving lanes from parapet to parapet, no other room. And it was on a vertical curve, a horizontal and vertical curve, actually, both coming from the approach onto the bridge. As you can imagine, the curve ended right where the bridge started. So if you had semi-trucks coming and going, passing each other, they had to consciously yield to each other if they were encountering each other at that point. Several times, semis got wedged at that approach right there onto the bridge. And Alton still to this day has a huge flour mill there. It's a big industrial area. They've got the river, they've got the barge traffic, they've got a lot of industry. As a matter of fact, they have a big brass manufacturing facility at the time. So a lot of movement of goods. And I remember that it was just sheer chaos when these trucks would get wedged, because it was affecting not only residential movement, but the industry, profoundly affecting them, which I appreciate much more now at this stage in my career than I did then. But it was all hands on deck, even for all of us on the new bridge, that we had to help any way that we could to try to get the first responders in there and help them, because we also used that bridge to move goods back and forth, because we were under construction and didn't have a through roadway on the bridge. So it affected us too. And that was when I really understood, my gosh, this isn't just about getting cars over a river. This is an economic engine that drives this whole community and affects everything. Jobs, movement of goods. That was when I really, truly started to understand the role we played beyond just building infrastructure.
Yeah, that's a great story. Really interesting. Bridges are like the ultimate connector, right? People can also see it, but there's not usually another bridge right next door. So that's why those construction projects are so difficult. You have to usually shut it down or build a full new one just to keep things going. And I think for the listeners, you gave some details there. So 20-foot wide in both direct for two-way traffic, I'm guessing. So 10-foot lane one way and the other way, just so people understand the vehicles we usually look at are usually like 8 feet wide. We consider that, so not much room. Nowadays, usually lanes are like 12 feet or so you can see that. And I'm guessing this was a box truss. So there was a top of the bridge, and that's where the semis were getting wedged. And that is a problem just on its own, right, on a straight road. But if you have a curve coming into that, or a vertical curve where people can't see, or you have snow and ice conditions there in Illinois, then you can see how that could turn into a big problem pretty fast. So an important challenge you were solving, but not an easy challenge to solve. So I can see why that one sticks out for you.
It was momentous when we demoed the old bridge and blew it up and shot it down. I look at that with an air of respect. I think, my goodness, it was built in the 20s. It served its purpose so well, but it was so inadequate for what we needed today. We did have to move on. So it's bittersweet. It's bittersweet.
Sure. Well, that's just one of many examples I'm sure you have over your career that led you to eventually serving as the ASCE Global President, in addition to your other roles. But that's one of the most, I think, visible leadership positions in the country, if not the world, for engineers. Do you just want to share a little bit about how that came to be? It's a whole process. I don't remember how many, you would tell me what the membership is of ASCE.
It's 165,000, and we're in 177 countries.
Okay, so there you go. A for you, D for me. Okay, I knew it was a lot, but 160,000. When you're the global president, you're one of 160 some thousand that get selected for that role. So what drove you to step into that role? Obviously, you had a great career, you're doing great things. And what did you hope to influence or achieve in taking on that role?
I really approached it the traditional way. I started at our local level. I served as an officer and a president at the St. Louis section. And then when I ran the gamut at the local level, I said, what can I do at society level that would be helpful? And I was appointed on some committees, and I started to see what was happening at we're not supposed to say national, right, because we're global, but society level. Predominantly, my role was confined to the national, right? Until I became president, I knew of what was going on internationally, but I was more engaged nationally. I got involved on the infrastructure report card. So the very first one was done in 1998. I had a very marginal role there, but the next report card that came out, I was more engaged and more involved. I was part of the team that was gathering information and helping to prepare and review the report card. And I started to understand that we really, ASCE, I have to give them a ton of credit, started from scratch. One of the things that I've really been noticing about public discourse lately is that everyone expects that, well, you said this 2 months ago and now you're saying this. It's like, well, yes, but we have more information now and we know more now. So yes, of course, we've adjusted how we're viewing that or how we're handling it based on the additional information we have, which is why we need more scientists and engineers in lawmaking, because we're in a dynamic world. Things change. Evidence and facts are presented in greater detail as we move down the road. We still have to take that into account. So same with the report card. Number one, we only had a few categories that we looked at. We've expanded to more categories now that we need to look at. It gives us a baseline so that we understand not only where do we need to invest, but over the years, we understand when we invest, the impact that it has on the infrastructure. It's such a huge tool. So I got very involved with the report card. That's really when I started to understand, boy, as engineers, we can't be in a bubble. We've got to understand, number one, where is the investment coming from and the funding coming from to build the projects that we need to build? Why do people not understand the importance of operation and maintenance in addition to capital investment? I really got involved there. And then I was encouraged to run for what we call a governor. So you get elected to these positions at ASCE. You have to run for an election. I was actually appointed. One position as the governor is appointed, and I was appointed as a governor. And then I ran for director. That was an elected position. And once you're a director, I was a director of Region 7, which was the 7 states in the Midwest. And I noticed that we understand the urban and rural divide and what our needs are, our perspectives are, is very different. And it's really important. I started to learn more about the urban needs from my colleagues who served, whether it be in the East Coast or the West Coast or Atlanta or Dallas, or Chicago even. I know a little bit about Chicago from being in Illinois, but having a more broad understanding. And I wanted them to understand the unique perspectives of the rural areas and some of our unique challenges and differences. And they're not all the same. And we have to appreciate that about each other to really work together. I got to be on the board of direction as a director for 3 years, and I saw the presidential officers who served. I really wanted the Midwest to be represented. As far as I know, we hadn't had anybody from even the state of Illinois since the 1950s serve as a president, and we didn't have a lot of representation from the Midwest. I was also one of the few people who was a first generation engineering college graduate. And I wanted our membership, especially those who followed a similar path to me, to know that this is something that they could do. And to be honest with you, Shane, I had no idea if I was going to be able to win the election. It was contested. I had to do, we call them forums. They weren't debates, but we had a lot of them. We had to do one with our international members, and we had translators involved, and it was quite a process. But I knew how important it was, and I was just driven. I'm so driven to serve. I always tell young people, if you want to change the world, man, you couldn't pick a better profession than what we do. You really can't, because we do change the world for people in the projects that we do. We protect the health, safety, and welfare of our communities through the projects that we build and design, whether you're talking water, wastewater, roads, bridges, public transportation. There's a lot of ways that we really contribute. I went for it and I ran, and I was very lucky, and I won my election, and I was able to serve. And it's a 3-year commitment. You start out as a president-elect, then you serve as president, and then past president. And I just finished my term at the convention in October in Seattle.
Oh, great. Sorry I missed you there. I was presenting and I was running around doing some different things, but congratulations on that. Tenure. You said lucky, but I just want to be clear that luck is the combination of preparation and opportunity. So you had the opportunity, you were prepared, and you won. Kudos to you on that. I did want to touch just for a minute on the infrastructure report card, because I think it's a really valuable initiative and tool, because you're taking complex engineering, asset management, evaluation data, and you're diluting it down to just a report card, A through F, which everybody can understand from grade school. And because everybody can understand that, then legislators can understand that, even if they're not engineers, and we know there are a few engineers. And because of that, ASCE is able to positively influence policy around infrastructure funding. Now, we don't always get what we need for infrastructure, but I think it's in the discussion because of your efforts and ASCE efforts around the report card. And I'm sure you were there in that big conference area in DC in the spring when we were advocating at Capitol Hill for this. I was representing California, and you representing Illinois and the Midwest. By the way, thank you for representing the Midwest. I grew up in Michigan, so thank you for that.
Excellent.
Yeah. So you've been on Capitol Hill. You've seen what policy and action can mean for productive and positive uses. And speaking of infrastructure funding a little bit, public infrastructure funding and services is a heartbeat of this podcast. From your vantage point, what do you see as the biggest infrastructure challenge facing Illinois, and then because of your other roles, the nation currently?
Well, there's a lot to respond to with that, but really what it comes down to, Shane, is resiliency. I think the number one critical issue that we have both at state, local, national, worldwide level is resiliency. When we talk about resilience, I think people think, oh, you build something that's not going to only survive the conditions that you think it's going to be subjected to, but also what potentially could occur in the future, right?
Right.
Well, it's not just that. It's not just about the projects that we build and how we build them. It's about the pipeline of the people that we have available to fill the roles that we need.
So workforce resiliency is what you're talking about there too, it sounds like.
Workforce resiliency. I'm talking about the materials, the supplies. One of the things that I was really impressed with, one of my mentors early on in my career at the Illinois DOT was a gentleman who, Jim Easterly was his name. He passed away in 2011. It was a huge loss for our industry. I remember one time when we were sitting and looking at planning projects for our district, which was 13 counties. We were saying, well, this is really a high need project, and this is a high need project, and we were debating it. And he said, we have to make sure that we are building projects throughout our district. We have to keep our aggregate suppliers, our concrete suppliers, our asphalt suppliers. We have to keep our steel suppliers, everything that was local. We have to keep them strong. If we keep them strong, then we will always have the quantities that we need at prices that we can afford. And I remember when he said that, once again, it was one of those aha moments in my career where I was like, okay, I hadn't thought about that. That did not even come into my mind. And I don't think we do that now. It's all about short-term thinking and expediency. It's all about, we want to know what the quarterly reports are for corporations. We want to know what that stock price is now. We don't think about longevity anymore, and we've got to do that. And it's not longevity for me. It's longevity for us, for all of us. And we've really got to shift our thinking about that. So when we're talking about resiliency, it's about coming together and thinking about what is best for all of us. And those of us who are in rural areas, those of us who are in urban areas, those of us who rely on agriculture, those of us who rely on ports at some of the shores on the coast, we have to understand how it is all a system of systems that are interconnected and interrelated.
Interesting, some systems thinking they're systems of systems. Interesting. So your project may not be able to succeed in your community if the system isn't functioning properly. To get all infrastructure requires materials at this point. So that's an interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah. The other data point I think on resilience, which is made through ASCE and others, is that it's one of the only investments that gives you a return, right? You get a return on that investment. So many expenses that the government has, it's like an insurance policy or service. You get some value for it, but you get the value that it goes away. Resilient infrastructure investment, I think the ratio is for every dollar you spend on infrastructure toward resiliency, it's a $6 return. And then in the coastal areas, and we're in the coastal area, it goes up to 13
Yes.
because of all the events that occur.
Yes.
That's why I always like to advocate for it. I'm sure you do too, because if you were doing your own business or your own finances, wouldn't you want to invest in something that actually gives you a return on that? And also, I'm sure you would agree that it's not just a return, it's a necessary expense anyway. So if you don't invest in it, it's just going to get more expensive later. So you might as well do the right thing, get it done.
Well, right. And the other thing is, let's get back to the workforce. If our profession is revered, as it should be, that it's held in high esteem. If you think about the countries in the world, I'm fortunate because of the role I've had much more exposure globally to our profession. If you look at areas where engineering and resilience are held in very high esteem, you can look at the Nordic countries. They really do get it. They understand. And what's interesting about the Nordic countries is, number one, education is free. A lot of places around the world, education is free. That was an eye-opener for me. I hear bits and pieces, but we're one of the few where it isn't. Yeah. One of the things that I thought was fascinating about the Nordic countries is they will invest to build systems that they know, because they are very conscious about climate adaptation. They have to be. There's no debate about if the climate is changing. They're way past that. They are investing in the adaptation. And people who go into engineering, that is considered a really honorable profession and held in very high esteem because they understand the importance. It's not a silent profession there.
Interesting. I like your point about education in other countries. Not only is it not free here, it goes up every year, right?
Right.
So I want to make sure I get this right. Correct me if I don't. Your campaign, I believe, is emphasizing infrastructure investment as a driver of jobs. You just mentioned that, kind of safety, economic development. I want you to make sure that's right as I said it. And then can you share an example from your career where infrastructure investment created clear positive ripple effects in a community or region?
Yes.
You talked about the bridge, but maybe you have others. First, I want to make sure I have the emphasis of your campaign correct.
I call it opportunity, because if you say infrastructure, people don't always know what infrastructure means because it can mean a lot of things. And if you say the economy, that means a lot of things to people too. So I call it opportunity, because what I have seen over my 30 years in this industry is when we build projects, opportunities follow. Economic opportunities, job opportunities, both before, during, and after the projects are built. And I see these areas thrive, just thrive, from when we go in and we build strong infrastructure and we provide multimodal movement wherever it is. It's just palatable, the difference you can see in these communities and these areas. And quite honestly, where I saw that the most was here in our region. I was just a very small part of the project, but the whole story is just profound, how it affected our area. Many years ago, FEMA went through what we call the remapping, right? They do the flood maps, and that's where you get your insurance if you're doing an industry or commercial, even your home, right? You compare to the flood maps, and that tells you what you're going to have to pay to cover the insurance and the liability for whatever you're building. When FEMA went through working with the Corps and we're going to remap, our levees were not rated for protecting a 100-year event or a 500-year event. And so everybody here was really concerned. What is that going to mean? Because we had an area that was going to be developed into warehousing, We've got all the class 1 railroads here. We have interstate. We have the Mississippi River here. So we have barge, inland waterway movement. And we were going to utilize all of those modes of transportation and build some warehousing here. Well, all of that was put on hold. The developers, the investors, like, whoa, time out. The return on investment is no longer viable if this is no longer protected by the levees. So one of the things I am so proud of, and this was where I appreciated the legislators who were involved at that time, the 3 counties that were affected, those county board execs got together and passed a sales tax so that they could themselves hire the engineering firms, the engineering know-how to design the improvements for the levee. It took a lot of coordination with the Corps of Engineers. There was a lot of fits and starts. But the fact of the matter is that the Corps said it would take them 40 years to do what this group of forward-thinking legislators and public servants were able to do in 10 years. They were able to go in, make the improvements to the levee system, and now you go on I-270 right outside of where I live, and you can see the development growing, the jobs that are growing, the movement of goods that are happening, and the use of that land that it was going to be used for originally, it is now used for. And the economic development of the people who provide the services, the restaurants, the stores, that people are moving here because there's jobs here. It's a ripple effect in the economy. And I can see it very clearly. As a matter of fact, one of my neighbors works at one of those warehouses as a supervisor, right? So I've seen the impact of that when we all work together and understand the big picture, how it improves everybody's situation.
Yeah, great points, great anecdote and example. I think for our listeners, they're probably familiar that if a levee is decertified, it's almost as if it doesn't exist because it's found to be insufficient. So then your floodplain goes back in what the levee was supposed to hold it out, and then you can't build appropriately and you get to pay extra insurance. And it has probably hundreds of acres of impact, likely in that case.
Yeah, yes.
Great example. You're doing a great job as an engineer in all these roles and helping with things like that. But in legislative roles, it's a pretty minor statistic. We don't have a lot of engineers in legislative roles. I know one of our California senators is an engineer, and that's almost an outlier, maybe 1 or 2 in the entire Senate. For me, one of the most compelling aspects of your campaign is your engineering background. And why is it important now more than ever to have engineers and technical professionals serving in legislative roles from your perspective?
It goes back to what I talked about earlier, that we have become a society of expediency, right? We want a quick fix. You hear people talk about, well, if it's more than 2 clicks, you're going to lose them. We don't have the attention span that's needed. In our world, we can't afford to do that. We start with a concept, we put a plan together, then we design, and then we build. And all along, we have to think about what is it going to take during construction, after construction. We have to think about maintenance. We have to think about operations. We think about it from cradle to grave, as they say, when we're building infrastructure. And I think we need more of that type of thinking in lawmaking and policy. We'll react to solve a problem that is presented to us, but we don't go from the beginning to the end. What are the implications of this? What really is the problem? As engineers, we'll have clients come to us and say, I need this. And then when you sit down and talk to them, and you'll find out that's not really what you need. What you need is, this is the problem that you have, and this is the solution to that problem. So it's a little different than what you asked for, which is okay. It happens. We're the experts. That's why they come to us. In lawmaking, I think we need to understand the long-term implications. I've got a good example for that too. I had a development where the owner of the property wanted to build a new manufacturing facility, and he needed to have a quick build out to start earning some money, right? He needed some cash flow. So he wanted to do a quick build, and then he was going to go into the whole development. And I encouraged him to do a master plan. I said, you've got to do a master plan because you've got to understand how to most efficiently build out this location. You'll save money on the utilities. You'll save money on the cost. Everything will be working together. The system of systems, right? So you want to go into it understanding how it all is going to interact and work. But I couldn't convince this property owner of doing that. And he went with another group, which is totally fine. I get that. And that's what's difficult in our profession too. If we're true to what we're supposed to be doing and give the advice we should be giving, that sometimes means we won't be hired because we're not giving the advice that they want to hear. And that's tough. It's hard. But I stand by what I recommended because I have seen this where people will go in and they'll piecemeal and well, we need this right away, so we're going to build this. Let's just say it's a manufacturing facility where you're going to have rail come in and unload and offload. You're going to have trucks coming in. Maybe you've got an inland waterway access. You've got all of that going on. And if you don't clearly define how it is all going to interconnect, you are going to be tearing something down and rebuilding something else because it's not going to work. If you invest in a master plan and build it together, it will all work together. And that goes back to resilience too, right, Shane? Because it will be a resilient development and structure down the road as things evolve and change.
That's true. I'm also thinking about your comments about having a view of longevity, and that's what engineers are expected to do to look out for the future. And you mentioned earlier on the levees and things like that, looking at a 100-year event or 100-year storm. What elected officials today are looking at 100 years from now in the decisions they're making, right? If they're in a 2, 4, 6-year term, I haven't been in that position, but it appears that those decisions are more within their term versus beyond the term, beyond when they would maybe even be alive. I appreciate that perspective. And the question is, will people appreciate that understanding when it comes to making some hard decisions? Now it doesn't look great. You, your kids, your grandkids will be the beneficiaries of that decision.
Exactly. You know, I'm in the St. Louis area. We have the Eads Bridge. We just celebrated the 150th anniversary of that bridge. 150 years later, it's still in the river, boats go under it, rail goes on it, cars go on it, vehicles, trucks, and people ride bikes and walk. Still to this day, 150 years later. If we were to build a bridge now, and they said we want that bridge there 150 or 250 years later, we would never be given the amount of funding we would need to build a structure. But we're still living on structures that were built that way 150 years ago, thankfully.
Yeah, that's interesting. To your point about investment in infrastructure, especially bridges, that's why we tend to see every year these major bridge failures and catastrophes, just because
we're pushing them past their design life.
For sure. If you think about the expansion of infrastructure across the US, the 50s to the 70s, you had 50-year design life. We're past it, right? Or 70 years. So you're going to bring a lot of interesting things and perspectives to the Senate if you can be elected there. If you achieve that goal, what engineering perspectives or skills would you believe that you bring to the policymaking side that might be missing from some of those rooms today? We talked about a long view. What else are your thoughts there?
In our profession, we have to talk to the public. That's part of what we do. So we're in a unique position in our profession where we talk to investors, right? Municipal bond brokers, managers. We talk to elected officials who have what their wishes are, right? We talk to the public. We talk to our own profession who are serving as the client, whether they're at the city, village, township, state. We work with each other in the different roles that we represent. And then we go to the public and we say, what is your experience of whatever this facility is? And what needs do you have to have met if we're going to improve it? And then we have to take all of that information and put together a plan that, number one, can be built with the funding that we have in the time frames that we're given with whatever materials are available at that point in time, which we sometimes go through those ebbs and flows as well. Our profession by nature is constant problem solving mode. We're constantly in problem solving mode. We're constantly in listening and learning mode. As engineers, we're not telling, we're listening and learning the majority of the time. One of the things that I see with even running for office right now, we're constantly speaking. We're talking to people. We'll go to presentations. I want to have a conversation. I think we need more conversations and we need to listen more. And that can be difficult. It can be difficult. You have to get tough feedback. We're used to that. I'm sure lawmakers would argue with me about what they're subjected to, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of the angry feedback. I get that. We've had angry feedback during some of our public meetings too. We hear people's frustrations. It doesn't come as a surprise, let's put it that way. We can argue about degrees or levels of one versus the other. So I think as an engineer, what we bring to this world, this legislature world, is that we can listen, we can still problem solve, we can calmly discuss solutions. We're used to not getting our way. I can tell you that, right? If we could design and build what we would want, it would be a much different world. We understand that we have to work within certain constraints. We just have to. So that's not a surprise to us either. So I just feel that my training, my profession, and even my role at ASCE has really brought me to this point where I feel I can do a huge justice and can really serve the constituents in this district in a way that maybe they haven't been represented or served before. And that has nothing to do with ideology or any of that. It's just my lived experience that I can bring to them.
That's interesting. You're talking a little bit about trying to have some social responsibility about what do we need versus what do we want. And I like your delineation about, people might think of engineers some way, shape, or form, but civil engineers specifically are dealing with public infrastructure almost exclusively. And that means public financing, public policy, public regulations, public meetings, right? Protecting the public. It's all there, which I think is very translatable to a role in the legislature. You talked about listening. I'm listening to you. And one of the things that you said very specifically is thinking about resilient workforce for opportunities. What advice might you have for young engineers or younger engineers or professionals that might be aligned a little bit more with STEM and who might be considering public service, leadership roles in public service, or maybe a public office position?
What I would like to say to young engineers is what I see in the Gen Z generation and the Gen Alpha is that they were almost compelled to do public service. When I went to school, we weren't required. We did, but it wasn't a requirement. It's like baked in with this generation that they see public service and community service not as a, we'll do it if we can. They really see it as an obligation. So what I do try to share with people, young people who have the potential, and I really think everybody has the potential to do the work that we do. And I say, if you want to make a difference in the world and change the world, this is really the profession for you. We may not be celebrated like someone who maybe is in finance or internet sensations, things like that, who get celebrated in our community now. But I can tell you what, when things don't work the way they want them to, when they go and turn on their computer and the electricity's not there, or if the road is washed out because a flood came through and they can't get to where they need to go to an event or fly the plane to go to wherever they want to go, they understand the importance of what we do. I encourage young people to really consider this profession. It is a lot of work. There's no doubt about it. It's hard work, but it's so rewarding. I cannot tell you how proud I am when I drive around just this area. That's what's cool about the district that I'm running for election to right now. I have literally built, designed, and worked on projects in almost every single community that I would potentially represent. It makes me proud, whether I would be a representative or a state senator, just as a person in the public who uses these facilities. It makes me so proud to know that I was a part of it. It makes me really proud to know that I've contributed in a way that's palatable, that is giving back to the community, that's giving it value, that's helping people live more productive lives in a safe way and have better well-being. I love that. And the other thing that I love about the possibility of serving as a civil engineer is that I really get to bring everything that I've learned and everything that I've done to fruition and add more value to what I already know that's really going to make a difference. I hear people talking a lot about platitudes like, well, I believe in this, and I'm sure they do. I'm not denying that they don't believe in that. But when I say I am going to do this, I come from a background where I had to tell people my entire career, you want that? If that's what you want, okay, we will build it. We will build it. It will open up. You will be able to use it. You will see it. You will touch it. You will feel it. It will be there. That's my whole life. And so I think we need to approach struggles and issues from that perspective. One of the things that I see too is a shift in our profession from people who are in positions at the federal and the state level. We've got a lot of engineers who think they're about procedure and process, that they're there to police the procedure and the process. We've got to shift to understanding that we're there to create projects, to build. That is our job, is to build. And there's ways that we can do that that are more efficient than the ways we're doing it now. But that's our role. Our role is to build.
Yeah, to assist, to support, not just stop something. I liked what you said. I'm going to add some words to it, but you said people believe something, and I'm sure they believe it. And what I thought when you said that was believing in something doesn't get that thing done, right? You have to have the intelligence, the experience, the ability to work with people, understand the findings, be driven with your Midwest work ethic. That's how you get something done. Belief is a small part of it. So let's look at the track record, not just maybe what somebody believes.
Well, and part of engineering is we understand energy, right? Everything has potential energy, right? But
Right.
to have kinetic energy, you need motion, right? You have to move forward to have that kinetic energy. And that's what we're about. We're about taking that potential energy and creating the kinetic energy. And that's through movement, through action.
I agree. Yeah, let's get something done. Well, I know you're busy. You're probably got to head back to your job and your constituents, your clients, and your campaign. But Marcie, we thank you for sharing your story and your perspectives today on everything, infrastructure, which we're calling now opportunity, funding, and the critical role engineers can play and do play, hopefully, in shaping policy. Your work both as an engineer and now as a candidate highlights just how interconnected technical experience, community leadership, and governing policies really are. Today, we talked about a number of things: infrastructure, driving economic growth, safety, community well-being. That's the opportunity you talked about. Talked about how funding has to be matched with the ability to execute and trying to figure out those funding levels to ensure real results. Talked about how engineers can bring unique and essential perspectives, which you can, to legislative decision-making. And finally, that public service is a great option for people, especially if they want to be influencers, not for their followers, but influencers to improve their communities. A great path for technical professionals. And before we sign off, Marcie, anything else you wanted to add, or where can listeners learn more about your campaign or connect with you?
Oh, yes, Shane. I've never run for office before, so this is all new to me. If anybody wants to follow me on social media, I'm on Facebook and Instagram. It's Marsie for Illinois, FOR Illinois. And I've got a website. It's marcieforillinois.info. And I would love to get more in our community engaged and part of this campaign, because that's one of the things that I tell everybody who's on our campaign. I may be the candidate, but it's our campaign. The campaign is for the public, just like the work that we do is for the public. It's no different.
For sure. And we wish you the best with your campaign. I think a fantastic candidate. I'm not a voter in Illinois. I'm just objectively letting people know that. But to our viewers and listeners, thank you for tuning in to the Public Works Podcast. And please like and share this episode, especially for Marsie's benefit, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's free. And follow us on LinkedIn. Marsie's on LinkedIn as well. Remember to stay engaged, stay curious, look for those opportunities, as you said. And as always, please support those who are helping build better communities and providing services to the public. With that, thank you again, Marcie, for being on the show. And we hope to see you all next time. Take care.
Thank you, Shane.
That's a wrap. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Public Works Podcast. We hope today's conversation with Marsie Geldert-Murphey gave you insights into the future of resilient infrastructure, the importance of sustainable investment, and the critical role engineers can play in shaping public policy. To learn more about Marsie's work and her vision for Illinois, visit marcieforillinois.info, or you can connect with her on LinkedIn. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, share, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on LinkedIn, and access these episodes on your favorite podcast platform. That helps more listeners find the show and stay connected to the people driving progress and making innovations in the public works industry. Stay tuned for future episodes of the Public Works Podcast to hear expert interviews and conversations that highlight the systems, services, projects, and people building stronger communities every day. Until next time, I've been your host, Shane Silsby. Stay engaged, continue innovating, and as always, keep building those communities that connect us all. Thank you very much.